Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. When the sun shines in early autumn, you get the best light of the whole year. And the grass borders are also reaching their peak. So that combination of this low, silvery light and these lovely, tawny, faded tapestry colours with the textures interplaying and glimpses through the grasses is a moment that I wait for all year long.
In the next instalment of her series on the botany of plants, Carol digs deep to uncover their fascinating secrets.
This week, I'm delving into roots. They go down into the ground, pull up loads of nutrition, lots of minerals, and water, of course, essential for the plant's growth.
And Jo meets the fashion designer Dame Zandra Rhodes to get an exclusive look at her rooftop garden.
It started as a little pot plant 25 years ago.
25 years ago.
You can look at it from the street and it looks lovely.
And I shall be planting up some pots for winter, both for sun and shade, as well as adding to my stone alpine troughs. This border in the wildlife garden was planted in spring predominantly to attract insects, and of those insects, predominantly to attract bees. And it's worked. It's done pretty well. You can see now we've got the echinacea that's flowering, the agastache has flowered all summer long. There's not been a day when it hasn't been full of flowers from spring through till now. Things like this lovely dark scabious. Look at that. Now, some of the annuals are looking tired. So, for example, this Ami can come out. I've got some Cerinthe there, which is past its sell-by date. Make some room and bring in some flowers that will extend the flowering season for bees, because that's the key thing, is to have early to late and a constant flowering period in between. And that gives me a bit of space in order to work. And the plants I'm going to put in are sedums. Now, this one is one called Matrona. And it has got a glaucous colour to it, and this pink flower. And it will grow to 2, even 3 foot tall in really good soil. And, of course, it's giving autumn colour because they flower from August through till November. Now, what I am going to do is dig that out a bit. Now, with most plants, that's perfectly good soil. However, with sedums, they really do need drainage. It's absolutely essential that they have good drainage, so I'm going to put some grit underneath it. Matrona is a variety that will take a certain amount of shade, so for planting in a border, it is actually a good choice. Now, I've got a couple of other varieties here. There's this one called Purple Emperor. And, of course, the reason why it's called Purple Emperor, it has these extraordinary chocolate leaves and the dark pink, almost ruby-coloured flowers. And these tiny flowers, by the way, are not only really good for bees, they absolutely love them, but butterflies love sedums too, and hoverflies like them. So these tiny little flowers are good for them. And, of course, hoverflies eat aphids. So you're not just adding to the mix of wildlife in general, you're actively helping your garden get its own balance of predators and pests. Now, the third one I'm putting in, I think can come in here. And I think this Cerinthe can come out, and I could cut this salvia back, actually. Now, this is probably one of the best-known sedums of all. It's called Autumn Joy, or Herbstfreude. And it's got these incredible, great pink, purple cauliflower heads and lovely succulent leaves. In fact, one of the features of sedums is they are succulents, which means that they can cope very well with drought. Don't cut these back over winter. Leave sedums to slowly die back. They do so with great elegance. But then next spring, when you start to see little nodules of growth, then you'll find you can almost pull off the old shoots and certainly cut back those that you can't take off. And the butterflies and the hoverflies and the bees will love it. Now, last week, Carol started a new series looking at the botany of plants, and she focused on seeds and their incredible diversity. Now, this week, she's going underground.
For centuries, we've been seeking to unravel the mysteries of plants, to unlock their secrets and enable us to have a better understanding of how they grow. As gardeners, we play a small but important role in maintaining the diversity of plant life on our planet. Yeah, we grow plants because they're beautiful and for our enjoyment, but if we learn more about their botany, it can help us all become much better gardeners. Last week, I was looking closely at seed and having fun seeing the ingenious ways they spread themselves far and wide. This week, I'm delving into roots. Roots are the foundation of plants. They help anchor them to the ground, giving them stability. Roots are like underground reservoirs, storing food produced by photosynthesis from the leaves. And they also soak up water and minerals from the soil. They're essential to the well-being of a plant. Provide the right soil conditions and plants will more or less look after themselves. There are two main types of roots. There are tap roots and fibrous roots. Now, we're all familiar with some tap roots. We come across them almost daily, well, I do in my garden. Dandelions and docks both have these deep, deep roots that go down into the ground, pull up loads of nutrition, lots of minerals, and water, of course, essential for the plant's growth. On the other hand, there are some plants that have fibrous roots. No taproot at all, but lots and lots of fine feeding roots which spread out just below the surface of the soil. Imagine they're growing in leaf mould, and all that nutrition is just under the surface of the soil, so they'll spread themselves out. Then there's a third sort of subcategory of roots. These are storage roots. Things like carrots and parsnips we're all very familiar with. They're full of sugar and starch, and they belong to a family that used to be called umbellifers, but now it's Apiaceae. But there is one umbel that we really don't want in our gardens, and that's ground elder. And look how invidious it is. It's got these rhizomatous roots that go right through the ground, and then every so often these little fibrous roots that come from them, which make a brand new shoot and cover your garden, almost impossible to eradicate. To delve into this underworld of roots, I'm at the Cambridge University Botanic Garden, at the Sainsbury Laboratory, which is a leading centre for plant science. Here, I can look inside plant roots using a powerful microscope and see the cells that make a root grow. Well, these are the images from the lab, and they're really fascinating. You can see here quite clearly the root cap. That's the bit that protects the tip of the root, and it constantly disintegrates as it pushes through the soil. And if you go about 5 of these cells further up, you come to the stem cells that form the meristem. And those cells are the ones that are constantly elongating and dividing, and they're the ones that are responsible for making the root wider and longer. From the moment a seed germinates, the radicle or root develops tiny root hairs. They increase the surface area of the roots, enabling them to soak up nutrients and moisture from the soil to feed the plant. The legume family, peas and beans, have got a really intriguing relationship with the soil. If I dig up one of these lovely looking runner beans, I should be able to find nodules on its roots. Look, it's got some. Look at that. Those lovely little nodules. They're created by bacteria in the soil. What happens is that the bacteria take nitrogen down from the air and turn it into nitrates. And the nitrates feed the plants. You know, you hear all this stuff about leaving the roots of peas and beans in the soil, and it's a great idea when you're clearing your plot, put the tops on the compost heap, but leave those roots in the ground, because as they decompose, they'll go on giving any residual nitrates back to the soil. Isn't it a wonderful relationship? The nitrates that are left behind add to the fertility of the soil, which can be used by other plants in the garden. As gardeners, providing we give our plants the conditions they need and nurture our soil, there's no need to feed them. The roots will take care of that. Next week, I'm going to be looking at the scaffolding of plants, their stems.
I do find that complex interrelationship between plants and soil endlessly fascinating. But there is one very simple thing that comes out of it, which is that plants know how to look after themselves. They have the equipment. Flowering plants are fading away, and new ones are not coming to take their place. So if you want your garden to look good over winter, the choice is getting more and more limited. However, it's perfectly possible to have a pot with a really good display that will take you right through winter. And I've got a couple of pots here. I'm going to plant up one for a shady spot and one for sun. And the idea is both of them will look good from now right through till next spring. So let's start with the shady one. I've mixed up peat-free, normal potting compost with a little bit of leaf mould and a little bit of grit, but normal potting compost will do. About half fill it, because the secret of this is to build it up in layers. Now, the first layer to go in are actually one of the latest plants to flower, and that's some daffodils. And I've got here a variety called Minnow. Not grown it before, but it's short, so that if it's in a pot, it's not going to swamp everything else around it. So I'll put a layer of soil on top of that. Now, I've chosen for the centrepiece a Mahonia. This is Mahonia japonica. And as well as these dramatic leaves, they also have quite delicate, lemony yellow flowers, which in a sheltered garden will start flowering as early as late November, but they will go on flowering into March, and they have fantastic fragrance. And now some more bulbs. These are tiny. This is Scilla. They're little hyacinth-like growths, deep, rich blue, that will contrast with the yellow of the Mahonia and the yellow of the daffodil, although the Scillas will be more or less over by the time the daffodils come into flower. These will start flowering in February. And the intensity of the blue shines out on a winter's day. Now, the next stage is some understory. I've got ivy here. I've got this very small leaf variety called Anita. So I'll probably put 3 of these in around it. And when you're planting any container for winter or even summer display, pack them. Load them up, because you're looking for a really big impact, even with these relatively modest plants. That's the structure under there, and then I'm going to infill the final plant of these cyclamen. This is Cyclamen coum, and this will flower later in spring. So you have this lovely foliage, and they have a range of pinks coming through. So come next March, April, there will be a mass of colour here. And throughout winter, it'll be cool, dignified, and waiting to explode into life. Right. Let's go back, and we'll find a shady spot. It's all right, Nige. But this pot is destined for full sun. And the same idea of building it up in layers, although this time the layers are going to be a little bit simpler. So I'm using exactly the same compost. And actually, I'm going to use the same daffodil in both, because minnow will grow perfectly well in a bit of shade, but it will grow even better in full sun. So put a protective layer over the top of those. Like that. Now, the centrepiece is this cornus. This is Cornus sanguinea midwinter fire. And as well as having the autumnal foliage, also, its main claim to fame are these fiery stems, which look at their best between November and into March. And I'm going to underplant it with more colour. I love winter flowering pansies. This is red blotch, and you can buy a tray like this for about £2 or £3, and they will go on flowering from now right through till next spring. Now, when the minnow daffodils come through, I will cut these flowering stems of the pansies right back. In spring, it's a good idea just to shear them away. They will regrow, but it means that the daffodils will take over. So, I'll water both these pots. And by the way, with winter coming, it is worth thinking about winter hardiness of pots. You can buy pots that are protected against frost. They're more expensive, but actually they're much cheaper in anything other than the immediate term because they don't break, and therefore you don't have to replace them. If you've got a valuable pot, or it's really cold, you may well have to wrap them in bubble wrap or hessian or fleece. Now, hopefully, these will lighten even the bleakest midwinter day here at Longmeadow. But Joe has been to see Zandra Rhodes and a project that they've both worked on. And the one thing you can say about Zandra is she is never bleak.
I got to know Zandra Rhodes earlier this year when we collaborated on the redesign of the Greenwood Theatre, just around the corner from her design studio in London. Our brief was to transform the built-up urban area into something more cheerful and inviting. And my job was to design and plant the Pocket Park. We finished in May, and it's there we agreed to meet up and see how the space has evolved since then.
Can you remember what it was like before? Can you remember how grim it was?
I've noticed it's like the sunlight's come out. It really is all light and gorgeous. It's a neighbourhood area, but suddenly it's got a bit of life in it again.
Yeah.
I should come round with a camera. Look how all the rain has just stayed on all those leaves like diamonds.
Alchemilla mollis, that is. Ladies' mantle.
I've never seen a buddleia that colour.
Yeah, it's that Buddleia sun gold. It goes with your wall, you see, so
Oh,
all the
thank you,
colours...
yes.
Well, that's what I had to respond to that.
It's fabulous.
This is a good one, Zandra. This is called Albritzia.
I've drawn those.
Fluffy little flower.
I've drawn those in Texas.
Pink to match your hair.
Oh, thank you. You must come round and see my garden now.
Zandra lives just minutes away. Her roof terrace is above her design studio and busy workshop, where the team was adding the finishing touches, ready for London Fashion Week. Zandra's designs are often based around flowers and plants, so it's no surprise that she's a keen gardener.
This is the camellia terrace.
Oh, they're so healthy, your camellias. I mean, you can see the buds forming.
I know, isn't
Now.
it good?
But they're all grown in containers, aren't they? All different
All
sizes
in
of
containers,
pots and
but
everything.
you have to keep them wet.
Are they hand-watered? Do
Yes,
they like
they're
rainwater?
hand-watered from rainwater butts.
But how long have you had some of these? Are
This
ancient.
one is about 60 years old.
60?
I was given it 50 years ago.
Wow.
And it was my first camellia. And I drove it back from Paris.
So this is older than me. this camellia.
Aren't you lucky?
Looking... But you had a little bit of a scare this year, didn't you? Because you emailed,
Oh, I know. I
emailed
rang.
me.
Yes,
You
because
emailed me.
I was very concerned because I could see lichen on the trees. But I think
you
they're
thought it was a
doing
fungus, though.
I know. I was very worried, but it's looking OK now.
No,
I
it's
think.
they're
Yes.
looking really good. But lichen actually is a sign of good air quality.
Oh,
and
is it?
Yes. And
Oh.
considering, you know, you're in central London here, it's quite impressive. I mean, you're quite high up, I guess. Wow, and you've got a lot of colour.
We made this wall Frida Kahlo blue.
Yeah,
Which and really shows off the hydrangeas nicely. Aren't they lovely?
Yeah.
Well, they're watered every night. They'll be very happy.
And this yucca is just...
Isn't it looking good? Started as a little pot plant 25 years ago.
25 years ago. It works so well with the architecture,
I know.
though. It's,
It looks just right. You can look at it from the street and it looks lovely. These are what amaze me. I call these triffids. When I was given a little plant pot like this, then a giant one pops up and then I potted it and another one came up. It just keeps breeding.
Do these stay out all year, or do you
Well,
take them indoors?
All of the pots get wrapped in the winter.
OK.
Because my girlfriend said to me, now imagine if you were in a fur coat and you're standing out, what would you do if your feet were in freezing water? So we wrap them all in bubble plastic, everything that stays outside.
And these, I mean, how do you grow these? These look amazing.
They're very good, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Glass.
Oh, they're glass, are they? I can see your pots are empty. I brought you a little gift, Sandra.
Oh, and it's my colour.
A little bit of colour
Oh.
to go. It's your colour, and they
fabulous.
should flower well into the winter. Really
Oh,
lovely
that'd
little
be
cyclamen.
lovely. They're gorgeous. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for everything and showing
Thank
me
you for
around.
coming.
Now, I'm a countryman through and through, but if I had to go back and live in a city, then I definitely think I'd like a roof garden. I think they're fantastic. And certainly, Zandra's is inspirational. Now, over here, I've got a stone alpine trough that hasn't been as successful as it might be. And that could be, I think, because although it's got a really gritty mix, we've had some very wet weather. What they like is cold, dry weather, and then water in spring. And if you imagine the melting snow on the side of a mountain, that's what you're mimicking. I've got another sedum here to plant in. And this one is sedum Cape Blanco. It's got these lovely little rosetti type of leaves, almost like little flower buds. And it has little yellow flowers around June, July time. And they are very fascinating and jewel-like. And I'm going to add in a little fascinating, almost like a little tree. This is Crassula sarcocaulus, which is more hardy than most, but it's only hardy down to about -5. Now, here at Longmeadow, we often do get below -5, but not always, so I think it's worth a try. And of course, what you're doing is creating a little miniature garden where these tiny plants work perfectly in proportion with each other. This is a small fritillary, Fritillaria michaeloscia. They have fragility with enormous strength because they're coping with the harshest possible weather. Just plant them and leave them to it. They will grow and start to appear in March. And the only thing to watch with alpines is to make sure they have full sun, good drainage, and not too much winter wet. But these are tough plants as long as they don't sit in wet soil. Whilst winter rain is no good for alpines, it's a combination of summer rain and a bit of warmth that has done for my outdoor tomatoes. If you remember, back in the spring, we shared with you 4 different types of blight-resistant tomatoes. There was Lassetto, Fandango, Losano, and an unnamed variety. And you can see the effects of blight. There was a touch here last week and it has ripped through, and I've just left it there to show you the effects of blight.
The bush varieties have been much the worst hit. The cordons, which are all Fandango, are also showing signs of blight, but are looking much better. This may be because this is a more blight-resistant variety, or, as I strongly suspect, because they have a much greater airflow around them.
If you have got blight on your tomatoes, the thing to do is to compost the foliage and the fruit if you have a good compost system, because the composting process will kill off the spores. By the way, if you've got a tomato on a blight-affected plant that doesn't show any signs of blight, it's perfectly good to eat, so don't worry about that. Well, that's my story. I know a lot of you tried too, so we'd love to hear from you. If you go to our Facebook page, you can let us know how you got on, send us pictures, and maybe we can take stock of how blight was in our gardens in this summer of 2015. Well, so much for the bad news. Here are some good things that you can be doing this weekend.
There's still time to take cuttings from semi-tender plants like penstemon or this Salvia garanetica. Look for shoots growing at 45 degrees from the main stem that don't have a flower bud. Strip off all the lower leaves and cut them clean with a sharp knife at a node. Insert them into a very free-draining compost and put them somewhere warm. Water them and then keep them well misted. They should root quickly and can be stored over the winter before planting out after the last frost next spring. Any containers that are to stay outside over winter should be raised up above the ground with blocks. This will keep them from being sodden and also reduce the risk of damage to the pot through freezing. Although some runner beans will go on producing fresh bean pods well into autumn, many are finished and can be cleared away. Keep all the dried beans because they can be stored and used dried over winter. Clear away the support, and when they're cleaned off, they can be stored for reuse next year.
But don't dig up the roots, because as Carol said, these are legumes and they're fixing nitrogen which will stay in the soil. In fact, I'm going to plant some brassica onto there and they will take up that nitrogen. You may remember that about 6 weeks ago I suggested that you cut back your delphiniums once they've finished flowering, and that with any luck they would regrow and reflower. Well, that's the delphinium that I cut back to show you, and it's certainly regrown and is flowering gloriously. Come on, Nigel. And another plant that's responded really well to a good hard cut back is this euphorbia. It's Euphorbia wolfenii. And in June, I cut the flowering cymes, which are great long, curving, snake-like things, and all over the place, right down to the ground. It's grown back, it's nice and upright, it's a good shape. So when this flowers next spring, we'll be able to see it all without it flopping everywhere. Well, I don't know about next spring, but that's it for today. But I will be back here at Longmeadow at the same time next week. So till then, bye-bye. You're lying on the border. Come on.